ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Elvis Presley.
Nobody had ever hit the scene like that. Nobody ever changed music like he did. With his voice, with his gyrations, with the controversy. Oh, he was so hot.
It didn't make any difference if the guitars were out of tune or in tune or anything. Elvis Presley carried the show.
One for the money, two for the show. Get ready now, go, cat, go, go.
I saw his first performances, even though my mother, who now loves Elvis, was scandalized by Elvis the Pelvis.
I thought he was incredible. I mean, I thought, here's a guy that's spearheading a whole new thing.
I said, flip, flop, and fly. I don't care if I die.
I remember seeing him on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I thought, well, what is all the fuss about with this guy?
I was just immediately in love. I mean, I was a small child, but I knew, wow, this was my first, I think my first hormonal change happened right at that moment. I was only like 5.
Come on back and let's play a little house so we can act like we did before.
Elvis Presley live on TV, the darkest, meanest, most dangerous white man ever to be on television.
When most people speak of Elvis Presley's television years, they're usually talking about The Ed Sullivan Show.
Ready, set, go, man, go. I got a gal that I love so.
But Elvis's appearances on the small screen actually date back a full year and a half before the landmark Sullivan performances.
Right, I want you to know. Come on back and let's play a little house so we can do what we did before.
By late 1954, Presley's star was on the rise.
Come back, baby, I want to play house with you. Hit it!
His Sun Records renditions of That's All Right, Blue Moon of Kentucky, and Good Rockin' Tonight were getting a lot of airplay, but only on Southern radio stations. In October of 1954, Elvis was booked for an appearance on the Louisiana Hayride, a live Saturday night radio show that originated in Shreveport.
How'd you get your start on the Louisiana Hayride? What brought that all about?
I went down there as just a tryout, more or less. I went down there once, and I went back again a couple weeks later, and the people, they seemed to kind of go for my songs a little bit, so they gave me a job down there.
Louisiana Hayride was a fun situation for Elvis. He enjoyed being on there. It was more of a looser show than the Grand Ole Opry. In looser, I mean, they weren't as picky and as particular, and Elvis actually became a very quick, popular person on the Hayride. And it was Sam Phillips who got Elvis on the Louisiana Hayride.
When it came time for Elvis to go on stage, the first time at Shreveport, I looked out in that audience, and it was packed. The city auditorium was packed. I got my ass out there, and I found me a seat behind a bunch of old men and women, and there was kids over here, 18, 20, and I was going to be a one-man cheering section, because we just could not fail. And I got out there, and let me tell you something. Elvis went out on that stage, untried, unproven. Be the first person in this world to tell you that there's no one in the world could have been more nervous than he was, and you certainly understand why. When he went on and he started out on That's All Right, Mama, I thought I was going to really have to stand up, you know. And here is an old woman, she's a day, then 65 years old, was old for me, even me. And all of these, and the next thing you know, they were on their feet.
Well, that's all right, Mama. That's all right with you.
And Elvis Presley tore them up alive. That didn't tell me something. You know, you'd have to get a bigger blackboard and draw a picture a little bigger. It told me a lot, but I didn't have to stand up. I didn't have to do anything except rear back and enjoy it. Man, you're talking about, that was just like heaven opens up and says, come on in.
The audience's enthusiastic response led to a contract for Elvis to appear on the Louisiana Hayride every Saturday night for a year. Hayride also led to a fateful meeting with a drummer who would become a pivotal member of Elvis's backup band.
Tillman Franks, who was helping run the Hayride, he called me one day. He said, come on down to the office. I want you to hear this record we got. I said, yeah, I'd like to hear it. And I went down. It was Elvis, Scotty, and Bill. Oh, and it's a good record. I said, how many pieces they got on that thing? You know, and they said, no, it's 3 guys. I said, you got to be kidding. It sounded like a 6 or 7 piece band. I said, oh, we're going to invite him in. He's in a lot of play in Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, kind of in the territory there. And I said, yeah, he ought to do all right. Well, he come in. I said, let's go back to the dressing room, though, and talk about it and see what we're going to do. And all he had was That's All Right, Mama. And then the other tunes were all cover tunes. He'd just pull them out of the hat and we'd do them, you know. So that's how that kind of got started.
There was a jukebox operator convention in Chicago, and I was there representing one of the record companies. And Leo called me and he said that he had been down in Shreveport, KWKH, the Louisiana Hayride, and he had seen this kid. And the quote was, I don't know if he'll sell any records, but boy, what he does to an audience is just incredible.
They called him a cat in those days. That young cat down in the Hayride is tearing him up.
The Hayride was a good launching vehicle for Elvis. I think it was Hal Cantor, the director of Loving You, went to the Hayride with Elvis. And if you look at Loving You, it parallels a lot of what Elvis was doing at the Hayride and on tour at that time.
He was on his way to Shreveport, where I was going to accompany Elvis for his farewell concert at the Louisiana Hayride. And that was one of the primary reasons that I went to Memphis, not only to meet Elvis himself, but also to see him in action and to learn as much about his method of operation as I possibly could. And I was awakened about maybe 7:30 by hordes of children shouting Elvis's name, waking him up. He opened the window in his hotel room and leaned out and said, please let me get some sleep, folks. I'll see you all later. And they quieted down. And I was amazed at that. I never saw anybody control a crowd so effortlessly as he did.
On March 5th, 1955, in the midst of his Hayride radio contract, Elvis appeared on the Louisiana Hayride television show. Although it was only broadcast locally to the Shreveport area, it marked Elvis Presley's official television debut. In August of that year, Elvis signed another important contract, making Colonel Tom Parker his personal manager. Parker's aggressive style paved the way for Presley's move from small-time Sun Records to big-time RCA and some higher-profile television appearances.
Once I asked Colonel Parker, I said, Colonel Parker, did you get Elvis on the Hayride? He said, I did better than that, George. I said, what's that? He said, I got him off.
Jimmy and Tommy Dorsey were two musical brothers who had dominated the pre-rock and roll era of swing. By the mid-50s, they were hosting a weekly television series for CBS called Stage Show, which was carried nationwide. The Colonel arranged for Elvis to make 6 appearances on the Dorsey Brothers show, catapulting Presley from local to national prominence.
Most people think Sullivan gave Elvis the first national television. It wasn't. It was Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey.
Now the rest of America could finally see the revolutionary young singer who had taken the South by storm.
It's really interesting when you put it in the context of what else was on TV at the time also. You know, people flicking the channels would see, you know, Perry Como, you know, or somebody juggling plates, and then there's Elvis, you know. I think it was Peter Gorelnik had a great thing to say, that when he came on the stage in one of the Dorsey shows, he looked like a guy shot out of a cannon, and had the same impact.
Of course, we were scared, you know, a bunch of hillbillies out of Tennessee and Louisiana. Had never been out of no big towns or anything like that, and then going to New York to do a big, television show. It scared the heck out of us. But we went up there and we did what we knew what to do, just the tunes, and I guess it worked out real well. We did 6 of those shows, actually.
I'm one of those rare individuals who saw Elvis on his very first television performance. The Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey Show, a summer replacement for Jackie Gleason. So out comes Elvis Presley with Bill Black on bass, DJ Fontana on drums, and Scotty Moore playing that incredible guitar.
The first song Elvis performed on national television was Shake, Rattle, and Roll. It may have been a little off-key, but nobody seemed to mind.
Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Elvis Presley.
Well, get out of that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans.
The first time I saw him on television was on the Dorsey Brothers show. And I wanted the sound to be better because I was used to the Scotty and Bill sound.
I'm like a Mississippi bullfrog sitting on a hollow stump.
I thought it was just sensational. I mean, it didn't make any difference if the guitars were out of tune or in tune or anything. Elvis Presley carried the show. You could feel the rhythm. You could feel that pulse. That's why rock and roll was so big.
Well, listen to me, baby. Try to understand. I'd rather see you dead, little girl, than to wed another man.
My mother calls out to me, Raymond, you better come in here and take a look at this guy. You like this kind of stuff. I shot into the living room and went, boing. Elvis Presley live on TV. The darkest, meanest, most dangerous white man ever to be on television. He's wearing a cream-colored suit, black and white TV, that had a cream color to it, a dark shirt, and a cream color tie, and no doubt blue suede shoes. It was one of the transcendent moments of my life, altered my destiny. I said, okay, that's what I want. White guys can do rock and roll too.
America's reaction was decidedly mixed, including those who accused the white singer of ripping off the original rhythm and blues artists.
Up until that time, what it had been was Little Richard, Fats Domino, and Chuck Berry, and this is like the first white man I saw do rock and roll. I said, that is for this guy. And that's changed my life.
After his astonishing success on the Dorsey shows, other stars were eager to book Elvis. Milton Berle was one of the kings of TV comedy in the 1950s. In fact, one of his nicknames was Mr. Television. On April 3, 1956, just a week after his final Dorsey Brothers appearance, Elvis guest starred on The Milton Berle Show. Most of Berle's shows were broadcast from ABC in Hollywood with a studio audience made up largely of older people. But this one was televised from the deck of the USS Hancock, which was anchored off the coast of San Diego.
Tonight, the Milton Berle Show joins forces with the Navy in bringing you an hour of star-studded entertainment. And here they are, the men of the USS Hancock with their families. It is to them and to all the brave guardians of our shores, the men of the United States Navy, that we dedicate our show tonight.
And now, you guys and gals, all your wives and sweethearts, you're in for a real treat. This is the first time that the Hancock is going to rock and roll while still at anchor. Here's a young man who in a few short months has gained tremendous popularity in the music business. His records are really going like wildfire. He's America's new singing sensation, our new RCA recording artist. Here he is, a big reception for Elvis Presley!
Well, since my baby left me, well, I found a new place to dwell. Well, it's down at the end of Lonely Street.
Since the Berle program was basically a comedy show, Elvis tried his hand at a funny sketch opposite Uncle Milty.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and now I got a little surprise for you. Here for his very first public appearance, I'd like you to meet my twin brother, Melvin Presley. Melvin?
friends of Radio Land? Radio Land.
Radio Land, this is television. Melvin?
Milton or Melvin?
Melvin.
Must have another brother, too. Television? What the heck is that?
Well, it's a little box.
Yeah.
It's got a window in it.
Yeah?
Millions of people out there. And they're looking in a little window.
Yeah?
They can see you, but you can't see them.
What a dirty peeping Toms. But Elvin, you're wonderful. And keep buying them records, will you, folks? Mel, who's you? Elvis. Hot dog. Elvis needs the money. Well, I'll tell you, you're mighty proud to be here on this ship here, the Yushenkoke. And I want you to know the Yushenkoke.
Yushenkoke?
Yushenkoke. That's what it says on the side of the boat. U-S-S-H-A-N-C-O-C-K. Yushenkoke. What's the matter? I know how to spell.
That's USS Hancock, Melvin.
Keep buying them records. I'm real proud of you, Elvis.
Well, Melvin, I owe it all to you.
You owe everything to me. That's...
You taught me everything I know.
I'm glad you told that to the folks I did. I taught him his singing style. I used to drop grasshoppers down his pants. That's how I keep jumping around. Grasshopper. Keep buying them records. Do that for us. What are we going to do now?
Well, let's sing a song.
Let's sing a song to get it. Do the blue suede shoes. Half soul. Here we go. One more. Take it away.
Well, it's one for the money, two for the show. Ready now, go ahead.
The combination of Burl and Presley was magical. 1 out of every 4 Americans tuned in that night, which translated into over 40 million viewers. This led to a second and very controversial Burl appearance 2 months later, this time back at the ABC studios.
Hey, what are the Rich Brothers doing here? What are they doing? I was a young man. If you want an autograph, would you stand back there? I don't care who you are. Everybody wants...
I'm Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley! Give me the good old Rudy Valley days. Elvis, sing your hit song. You waking up tomorrow.
He made a dynamic impact by just his presence and the way he performed and all this moving and shaking, and well, especially I suppose when people see him on Milton Berle doing Hound Dog. That was just something no one had ever really seen before, a person move that way. It was just like he was moving and shaking the world at the same time he was moving and shaking on the stage.
You ain't nothing but...
The show was another huge hit in the ratings, but Elvis's sexy gyrations touched off a firestorm of criticism.
A lot of people that possibly don't like you.
I've been getting some pretty bad publicity lately, especially after the Milton Berle show. I got quite a bit of bad publicity because of my actions on the stage.
Quite a group of people who don't sort of approve of it.
I mean, I have to move around. I can't stand still. I've tried it, and I can't do it.
They seem to think that it contributes to juvenile delinquency and all sorts of things.
I don't see how they could think that it would contribute to juvenile delinquency. If there's anything I've tried to do, I've tried to live a straight, clean life and not set any kind of a bad example. And if I stood up in front of an audience and did nothing but sing, if I didn't put on a show, and if I didn't act like I enjoyed what I was doing, they wouldn't come out to see me the next time I went back. I'll tell you like this, there's people, regardless of who you are or what you do, there's going to be people that don't like you. There were people that didn't like Jesus Christ. They killed him, and Jesus Christ was a perfect man, you know. There's going to be people that don't like you regardless of who you are or what you do, because if everybody thought the same way, they'd be driving the same car, they'd be marrying the same woman, and that wouldn't work out.
And he said, we move when we sing. It's our way of showing love for the Lord, was to move. And that really, he said, I got those movements from singing religious songs in church. And why should they call it vulgar? And first of all, he wouldn't have done anything vulgar because of his mother and dad, the love he had for them. And he certainly would not have done it for the love he had for the people.
One popular show never had Elvis as a guest, but not necessarily because of the controversy.
Colonel Parker would never let Elvis appear on American Bandstand, certainly not for After Scale. I think it was $150 or something. Unbelievable. For that amount of money, he should have been on 2 or 3 times.
Despite the controversy, one television host was hot to book Elvis for an American Bandstand type show called Top 10 Dance Party.
One of the first things on his agenda was to do a charity benefit show for a charity organization called the Cynthia Milk Fund there in Memphis. So he wanted to promote that, and of course I was trying like the dickens to get him to come on as a guest on Top 10 Dance Party, and he wouldn't do things like that in those days. The Colonel did not want him making free, quote-unquote, freebie appearances. He wanted Elvis to be paid for everything. Of course, we had no budget, but Dewey Phillips and George Klein, thanks to them, and my brief friendship with him, he came on and promoted the Cynthia Milk Fund thing and leaned on the jukebox, and you know, it's kind of a interesting and a famous interview to this day.
How about the big show at Westwood Park scheduled for July 4th? Bob Johnson surely, I know, wants us to mention that, and we want to mention it. I believe the proceeds from this show go to the Cynthia Milk Fund. Is that right, Elvis?
Yes, sir, that's right. And I'd like to say let's see, what would I like to say? I'd like to say that we have a diamond ring that we're going to have as a door prize. It's my initial ring. I've had it for some time, and it has 14 diamonds in it. And we're going to give it away at the door as a door prize.
I see.
And everything.
And all the proceeds from this particular show, this is July 4th at Westwood Park. Elvis is going to be there. He's going to sing and play. His band will be there. Many other stars will be there, too. And we will certainly want you to watch Bob Johnson's column in the Memphis Press Seminary. Watch all the publicity on it and get your tickets in advance. Elvis Presley, I want to thank you again because we know you're a busy man, and thanks a lot for coming by and seeing us at the dance party and saying hello to all your friends here in Memphis and the Mid-South. Anytime you're in town and want to come by, we certainly will welcome you.
Well, thank you very much, Wink, and I'll see you again.
Okay, thanks a lot. Elvis Presley.
And I was nervous. The kids were nervous. Everybody was, I mean, it was like, that day at WHBQ Channel 13 was like magic. I mean, we had extra security there. You couldn't get near the place. There were so many cars out front because Elvis was Elvis in 1956, and he just got bigger from there. But it was quite a day. It's a day I'll never forget. It's ingrained in my memory.
But Dance Party was a local Memphis show. Would a popular national program still want Elvis in the wake of the continuing hound dog hysteria?
Ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful fellow who opened our show with such a big laugh tonight, Mr. Television, Milton Berle. Here he is.
Like Milton Berle, Steve Allen was another giant of early television. He defied the squeamish NBC brass and pushed to have Elvis on his top-rated Sunday night show, controversy or not. But by poking fun at Presley's image, Steve Areno avoided one controversy and generated another.
Well, you know, a couple of weeks ago on the Milton Berle Show, our next guest, Elvis Presley, received a great deal of attention, which some people seem to interpret one way and some viewers interpret it another. Naturally, it's our intention to do nothing but a good show. Somebody's barking back there. We want to do a show the whole family can watch and enjoy, and we always do. And tonight we are presenting Elvis Presley in his, what you might call his first comeback. And at this time, it gives me extreme pleasure to introduce the new Elvis Presley. Here he is. You look absolutely wonderful. You really do. And I think your millions of fans are really going to get a kind of a kick seeing a different side of your personality tonight.
Well, thank you, Mr. Allen.
I'll hold your guitar here.
It's not too often that I get to wear the suit and tails and all that stuff. But I think I have on something tonight that's not quite correct for evening wear.
Not quite formal? What's that, Elvis?
Blue suede shoes.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that Steve Allen show we did was, he wasn't very happy with it at all. But he didn't want to argue with Steve about it. You know, he knew that he didn't like it. And I don't know if he ever forgives Steve and Alan about that little situation or not. But he, you know, Steve said, well, I want to clean up your image and this, you know, that garbage. And Steve said that's what he wanted to do, but it didn't do it a bit of good. Elvis was going to be Elvis, you know, and people saw what was going on. And they thought, you know, the fans, and they thought it was pretty pitiful that they would pull something on him. But like I said, he didn't argue with, he didn't want to argue with Steve or anybody else. He said, hey, we'll do it and get it over with, you know.
Oh, no, he loved it. In fact, he spent the whole week in rehearsal laughing. Some people who now see him as second only to Jesus Christ imagine that he must have been affronted. But he wasn't a superstar at that time. He was just a young kid lucky enough to be on our big show. I mean, literally, that was it. So he had a marvelous time.
Well, Elvis, you're certainly being a real good sport about the whole thing, and now I have a little surprise for you. Gene, can I have the surprise?
There you are.
Thank you, Gene Rayburn. This, Elvis, believe it or not, is a giant petition. It was signed by 3 giants out in the alley. No, seriously, this was signed by over 18,000 of Elvis's loyal fans saying they wanted to see him again soon on television. It was sent in to us just the other day by our good friend DJ Don Wallace in Tulsa, Oklahoma. 18,000 signatures on this. Elvis, it's a fine thing.
I kind of like Steve Allen a lot. I think he's was a very brilliant guy, but I don't think he got Elvis. As a matter of fact, he was a bit of a musical snob, thought rock and roll was just some passing, you know, teenage fad, and obviously thought, you know, Elvis was just another teenage fad sort of thing. And, you know, the famous Elvis singing to the hound dog thing. I know Elvis didn't like that, but, you know, you got to see him in a tuxedo, and that looked pretty cool.
Putting Elvis in white tie and tails was one thing, but Steve's idea of a trouble-free version of Hound Dog was something else entirely.
I got you a very cute little hound dog right here, and away you go.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time.
I did the Steve Allen show. And they had me dressed in a tuxedo on the Steve Allen show and stand perfectly still. I couldn't move. I was standing like this. And they had me singing to a dog. Man, there was a dog here, you know. And I'm saying, you ain't nothing but a hound dog. And the dog's looking at me like, you know, what are you doing, calling me names or what?
Just as he had done on the Milton Berle Show, Elvis took part in some comedy sketches, including one featuring Steve, Andy Griffith, and 50s comedy queen Imogene Coca.
This doggy here is Tumbleweed Presley. Come on off, Tumble. I'll tell you about this fella. He is a trick rider. You ain't seen trick riding until you've seen Tumbleweed, right?
You tell him.
I'm telling him. You tell me to tell him, and I'll tell him. Yes, sir. But you know, let me tell you, yesterday he went across the range on a full gallop blindfolded, and he picked up a rattlesnake with his teeth. He jumped 4 fences, and he dropped that snake into a gopher hole at a full gallop. Tell him why it was so tough, Tumbleweed.
I don't use no horse.
Yippee-I-O, yippee-I-A, yippee-I-O,
Well, I got a horse, and I got a gun, and I'm going out and have some fun. I'm more worn than you galoot, and don't step on my blue suede boot.
Yeah! Yippee-I-O, yippee-I-A, yippee-I-O.
Just as Elvis had to answer for the controversy following his sexy rendition of Hound Dog on the Berle Show, he appeared on Hy Gardner's talk show the very night of his talked-about guest shot on Steve Allen.
Hello? Hello?
Did you have fun tonight on the Steve Allen Show?
Yes, sir, I really did. I really enjoyed it.
First time you ever worked in tux or tails?
It's the first time I ever had one on, period.
What do you keep in mind mostly? I mean, some of the songs you're going to do, or some of your plans, or what? What goes through your mind?
Well, everything has happened to me so fast in the last year and a half till I'm all mixed up, you know. I mean, I can't keep up with everything that's happening.
I want to tell you, it's just been swell talking with you, and you make a lot of sense.
Thank you very much.
Give my best to the Colonel now.
Sure will.
Bye-bye.
Steve Allen's chief competition on Sunday night was the Ed Sullivan Show. Sullivan, a newspaper columnist, was the quirky host of this wildly popular variety program. Straight-laced Ed had initially said he would never have someone like Elvis Presley on his really big shoe, but it was becoming increasingly impossible to ignore Presley's enormous popularity. so Sullivan changed his mind.
When Elvis was really starting to break big, Ed Sullivan was pursuing him to put him on the show, and the Colonel, he knew he could get the slot, but he told Ed Sullivan, you got to pay this outrageous amount of money, whatever it is, and of course Sullivan said, but Colonel, I mean, I've only got this budget, you got to, this is the budget, you got to do it. And the Colonel said, well, we're not going to do it for that kind of money. Go back to your sponsors and do what you have to do, but if you want Presley, this is what it's going to cost you. Sullivan went back, and they went back and forth. Elvis could have been on the Sullivan Show a lot sooner than he was, but during this time of the negotiations, this whole thing just kept building and building and building, so that when Presley finally went on Sullivan, it was an event.
If Ed Sullivan didn't want to stand on the same stage as Elvis Presley, he got his wish. Shortly before Elvis's first appearance in September of 1956, Ed ran into a little bad luck, literally.
Listen, the one thing I did want to check with you on, I know you don't get a chance to keep up with things too much when you're on the tour. Did you know that Ed Sullivan was injured in an automobile accident the other night?
Yes, sir. I read that in the paper.
It is. He is not going to be able to make his show until the 19th of August.
Is that right?
That's the first one he'll be able to make. I thought you might be interested in that.
Pinch hitting for the ailing Sullivan was Charles Lawton, the distinguished star of the classic Mutiny on the Bounty.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, once more to Hollywood to see and hear that man again, Mr. Elvis Presley, to Hollywood.
The tenderness of Love Me Tender won over a lot of viewers who had only seen Elvis as a vulgar rock and roller. Presley's appearance generated the highest ratings for a variety show in the history of television and opened doors for other aspiring entertainers.
Ed Sullivan was the first time I saw him. Yeah. I thought he was incredible. I mean, I thought, here's a guy that's spearheading a whole new thing, and it's exactly what happened. I mean, he just opened up a whole new area for all other performers to come into.
Once Elvis played Ed Sullivan, it was all over. This was the essence of rock and roll.
By the time Elvis made his second appearance on The Sullivan Show, Ed had recovered from his fender bender.
Elvis Presley!
Elvis was very much uptight doing the Ed Sullivan shows. That's one reason he wanted to be as close to the Jordanaires and DJ and Scotty and Bill Black as possible, is because he was a little bit insecure and he wanted to feel secure with us as close as possible. And if you'll notice, we were right behind him, and how they got a good sound on the 5 of our voices with just one overhead mic. You know, now everybody has an individual mic, and you don't have near as good a balance as we had on that show.
But a lot of viewers still didn't care for Elvis's sexy moves, so Sullivan came up with a compromise.
Someone came up with the idea of showing Elvis only from the waist up, because they felt those gyrations were lewd, they were terrible of them, the outcry, the churches. And it was a very effective ploy.
Here is Elvis. No, I can't be found sitting home all alone.
I just remember him and it being shot, you know, from kind of here up, and my parents saying, "Oh, they can't shoot the rest of him," and I'm like, what? You know, I didn't get it. I was just immediately in love. I mean, I was a small child, but I knew, wow. I think my first hormonal change happened right at that moment. I was only like 5. I was immediately just in love with him. The way he smiled and how sexy and how different and cool. I mean, up till then, you know, my parents' biggest favorite entertainer was Liberace, you know, so not much going on there.
Our family doesn't normally watch the Sullivan Show. We watch the Steve Allen Show. But that night, we watched Sullivan, and I said, "Oh my God, what is this?" And I was just a little 10-year-old kid, and I said, "Well, my past life is over. My new life is beginning." And I went down to the store where I usually bought stamps for my postage stamp collection. And they had a few records in the back, too. I said, "Forget that. Give me that record called Too Much right over there."
Well, honey, I love you, I know too much.
I thought this was the handsomest guy I'd ever seen. I mean, it is a toss-up. Now, Bobby Conrad will kill me if he hears this, because he was pretty hot himself, but he was just so beautiful. he had mischievous eyes that darted around the room. So he had the facility, to me, of talking to you, but if he darted one way or the other, that person was included in big time. So he could grab them all in at the same time, and I noticed that right away. I was riveted like everybody else.
You know, I grew up with him. I saw his first performances, you know, on the Ed Sullivan Show, even though my mother, who now loves Elvis, was scandalized by, you know, the Elvis the Pelvis nickname. When I met him, I couldn't believe how much charisma he had, how nice he was. He was so nice. He loved people. He was so warm and so kind and so generous that he was a bigger-than-life person.
Just as Elvis had crooned "Love Me Tender" on the first Sullivan Show, he wanted to alternate the hard-rocking "Too Much" with a kinder, gentler song for his third and final appearance.
He wanted to do Peace in the Valley, and the CBS official said, no way are we going to do a religious number. He said, I have promised my mother that I would do Peace in the Valley, and I'm going to sing it. And we did.
There will be peace in the valley for me someday.
I remember seeing him on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I thought, well, what is all the fuss about with this guy? And then there's no question that he had a charisma. He had such power, because I don't think he realized how much power he had, which is what made him so special. He just was what he was, and in being that, he took on this persona of something that was bigger than anybody else out there.
We end the book, actually, with a quote from Ed Sullivan. It's one of the things that he said after Elvis's last appearance, so now let's have a tremendous hand for a very nice person, which is just such a great, you know, summation of Elvis and his fans. Like, people just appreciate this guy. A lot of the reason why is because he was a very nice person.
Ed did not come to the dress rehearsal. He only came to the filming of the show. And on one of those shows, Ed walks over. You remember, shakes hands with Elvis and turns around and motions to us and said, this boy is really an okay kid. That's the first time we'd met him.
This is a real, decent, fine boy. And wherever you go, Elvis, the guys who accompany you over there, we want to say that we've never had a pleasanter experience on our show with a big name than we've had with you. You're thoroughly all right. So now, let's have a tremendous hand for a very nice person.
I think that Ed Sullivan was really the mainstay in kicking Elvis's career off. You know, Ed Sullivan was kind of like God in those days. What he said was good, went, you know what I mean? He walked over and said, this is an all right, this is a real nice guy, and all that type of thing. And I think that had an awful lot of people, because that show was the most watched of any TV show that's ever been.
As Elvis waved goodbye in January of 1957, he couldn't have known that he was also waving goodbye to his television appearances of the 1950s. Having done Sullivan, Steve Areno, and Uncle Milty, it was time for Uncle Sam. Beginning in March of 1958, Elvis Presley served 2 years in the Army, stationed in West Germany. In March of 1960, he was finally discharged, receiving a warm welcome from 19-year-old Nancy Sinatra upon his return to the States. At a press conference in Memphis, he announced his immediate plans.
Can you give us in detail some of your future plans?
Well, the first thing I have to do is to cut some records. And then after that, I have the television show with Frank Sinatra.
Sinatra's show, which aired in May of 1960, included some of his Rat Pack pals, as well as a reunion between Elvis and Nancy.
Hey, Frank! Over here!
Elvis was especially nervous because he had been gone in the Army for 2 years. Didn't know how he was going to be received. And, you know, Elvis, the way he showed his nervousness, well, he'd be walking back and forth in the dressing room or up in the suite or something, and he'd little perspirations of sweat. And You could tell he was nervous. He didn't talk too much. He was thinking what was going to go on in the show. But, you know, any good star that really feels what he does when he sings and performs gets nervous because they're always concerned about it. And he, once it all got started, it got rolling, he got back to himself again.
It's very nice to go traveling, but it's so nice. He's here in person.
I may pass out.
Some you won't like it. Where the heck are his sideburns? Germany. Well, I'll be a hound dog. And that's the opening, friends.
Well, Elvis, that's our little welcome home gift. The 2 years you lost while you were in the Army. And looking back over it, I'm struck with the realization that maybe you didn't miss so much after all. As a matter of fact, what you seem to have lost is your sideburns. Now, folks, what would you say if I were going to sing another song now?
If Elvis had vowed never to wear a tuxedo again after doing the Steve Allen Show in 1956, he seems to have broken that promise.
I forgot if Frank Sinatra said it or not. Somebody said, well, you know, everybody has to wear tuxedos. Well, Colonel Parker was in the meeting. He said, really? He says, all the guys with Elvis? Oh, yeah, it's tuxedo, it's a very formal show. Well, then he called Sinatra and them over to the side. He didn't say it in front of us. He says, well, none of the guys have tuxedos. So if you want them to wear tuxedos, you have to get them tuxedos. And, you know, Sinatra being the way he was anyhow, it didn't mean anything. He said, oh, yeah, well, make sure we get them tuxedos. Well, they sent a tailor up to the room, measured us all out. We all had tuxedos, which was great. We got to keep the tuxedos, too. I still can't fit into mine again. I don't know why.
Having matured during his Army days, Presley no longer looked out of character in a tuxedo, even while swinging his hips to his latest hit.
When he did Stuck on You, which is a pretty okay song, but not really a killer, and I saw him do it on the Sinatra show, and he had a whole different groove going. I was just saying, oh, he's marching right along, you know. The 50s were definitely over when he came back and did that tune.
Out in the kitchen, out in the hall, ain't gonna do you at all. 'Cause once I catch you in the kiss and start, the team of wild horses couldn't tear it apart. Yeah, because I'm stuck on you.
Elvis, I tell you something, it was great. It was great, and I'm glad to see the Army hasn't changed it. Wasn't it great?
That's the first time I ever heard a woman screaming at a male singer.
Don't you remember me there, Charlie?
Excuse me, sir, Mr. Presley, but would you think it presumptuous of Frank if he joined you in a duet?
Well, yeah, that would be great. I would consider it quite an honor.
I'll tell you. I'd like to do one of your songs.
All right.
I mean, you know, with you.
Fine, fine. You know, I was wondering, as a matter of fact, while you were singing, Elvis, I thought to myself, I wonder what would have happened if I had recorded Love Me Tender instead of you. I wonder if it made any difference.
I think it would, about 2 million records less. He said that.
You smarty pants.
And it was the first time, I think, that Elvis ever met Sinatra. So he was a little nervous. He didn't know what to expect because there was rumors about Frank saying certain things about Elvis when he first came out, that it wouldn't last long, the music wasn't that great.
Yeah, Frank Sinatra was one of the people who joined the angry mob and badmouthed Elvis, as did Bing Crosby. They were cruel. They said their comments are very mean.
Just a few years earlier, Frank Sinatra's talking about this famous quote, and it's in Elvis and You, about rock and roll being a rancid aphrodisiac, you know, and Elvis being, you know, untalented. And then a couple of years later, he's, you know, singing a duet with him.
My oldest daughter, Claudia, got right into Elvis Presley, like he affected every young person in the country, in the world for a matter. for that matter. But that's where I first heard about it. And you know, it's like a lot of times when your kids come along, you dismiss something because it's them. It's a terrible thing to do, but we all do it. You know, I say, well, they like that, I probably won't like it. You know, that's one of those things. But later on, I found out, of all people, Sinatra, the greatest singer that ever lived, no question, in my opinion, was a big fan of Elvis Presley. Mm-hmm. And I said to myself, wait a minute, I'm missing something here. If Sinatra thinks he's a great guy, great singer, great performer, whatever, I better pay more attention.
He could charm anybody, and then once somebody meets him, it's a completely different situation. So when Frank Sinatra and Elvis met together that day, you know, Frank treated him very nice. I mean, he was very nice to him, very polite, like he normally would be. But I think once he was around Elvis and saw what Elvis was, a nice, intelligent young man, very respectful for other stars and other people, I think Frank changed his mind about Elvis. He thought Elvis was a pretty good guy.
That was a great PR move, of course, as well, both for Sinatra and for Elvis Presley. Remember, the Colonel wants him to appeal to a new audience. What better way than to, you know, have him doing a duet with Frank?
You do Witchcraft, okay? And I'll do one of the other ones. Okay? Nelson? We work in the same way, only in different areas. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. You have made my life complete, and I love you so. Those fingers in my hair, let's come hither stare. That strips my conscience bare, it's witchcraft.
Elvis definitely tries to adapt a different style when he's singing Frank's song, Witchcraft. Kind of tries to sing it the way Frank sings it. But Frank, on the other hand, picks up Love Me Tender, and if you listen, he's trying to, I think, Sinatra-ize it by swinging it. And Love Me Tender is not, I don't think, meant to be sung that way. But Frank has a certain style of singing that he kind of, that's the way Frank sang.
Love me tender, love me true, all my dreams fulfill. For my darling, I love you, and I always will. It's such an ancient pitch, what I would switch, 'cause there's no nicer witch than witchcraft. I love you, and I always will. For my darling, I love you.
Man, that's pretty.
And I always will.
My memories of the show being taped was just great. I mean, it was exciting for me, first time being around this kind of a situation, and seeing the reaction. You know, this is the first time I saw Elvis on stage with a live audience too. So seeing the reaction from the audience and the people screaming and yelling and just all the excitement, it gave you goosebumps, and it was really exciting for me to see this. And I know Elvis was just beaming with joy that the reception was so well for him.
His television appearances, I think there were only 12 in the early part of his fame, you know, that was it. Like, America just got a look at that.
After the Sinatra special, Elvis returned to Hollywood and resumed his movie career at a dizzying pace. His appearances on the small screen were over, except for two notable exceptions. In 1968, his popularity sagging, Elvis made what is commonly referred to as the comeback special, which reminded everyone what an astonishing entertainer he had been and could still be. This led to Elvis's enormous success in Las Vegas and a quick timeout in 1973 for another television special, Aloha from Hawaii. This time, the show was broadcast live via satellite, reaching an estimated 1.5 billion viewers around the world. It proved to skeptics that Elvis, at nearly 40 years of age, was still a force to be reckoned with. Aloha from Hawaii would prove to be the last Elvis special to be televised during his lifetime. He spent his final years playing to packed houses in Las Vegas and touring all across America. But those early appearances Elvis Presley made, from Ed Sullivan
You ain't nothing
to Steve Allen
I'm a warning you, galoot. Don't step on my blue suede. Yeah!
to Milton Berle
For the show. Get ready now. Go, cat, go, go.
and, of course, the Dorsey Brothers show that introduced him to a nationwide audience, constitute a unique legacy in the history of television and popular music.
You'll be so lonely, baby. You'll be lonely. You'll be so lonely, you could die. Well,